Iz drevne prošlosti stižu odjeci o posve drugačijim pogledima na prirodu svijeta i čovjekovo mjesto u njoj. Time se bavi poznati autor i istraživač Michael Telllinger. U svojim knjigama Slave Species of Gods i African Temples of Anunnaki krenuo je tragom sumerskih izvještaja o nastanku čovjeka kao robovske radne snage bića znanih kao Anunnakiji. S obzirom na činjenicu da živi u Južnoafričkoj Republici, mogao je na licu mjesta istraživati stvarnost koja stoji iza pradrevnih priča o zlatnim rudnicima u Južnoj Africi. Tako je otkrio kompleks od 10 milijuna kamenih krugova koji se prostiru diljem Južne Afrike, a središnju točku tog divovskog kompleksa nazvao je Adamov kalendar. S Michaelom Tellingerom uputit ćemo se u drevnu, skrivenu rudarsku prošlost ljudske vrste. A put počinje ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Pozdrav svima, danas nastavljamo razgovor s Michaelom Tellingerom koji smo započeli o tehnologijama vezanim uz zvuk u prošloj emisiji. Michael, dobar dan.
Lovely being with you, thank you.
Ovog puta popričat ćemo o temama o kojima ste se bavili u svoje prve dvije knjige, o Anunnakijima i mitovima i o otkriću nečeg što ste nazvali Adamovim kalendarom. Ta priča je neizostavno vezana uz zlato. I koja je veza i koliko daleko u prošlost možemo pratiti vezu između zlata, između čovječanstva? Uostalom, čovječanstvo je i dalje opijeno zlatom, mada nitko ne zna zašto, tek u novije vrijeme počeli smo ga koristiti u tehnologiji.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because that is ultimately the fundamental question that brings us to this place as a species. It is almost impossible, well, I have not been able to find a break in this research, the fact that gold is the common denominator of all of human history. All ancient cultures, all ancient civilizations, wherever you go around the world, they seem to have been obsessed with gold. Often we find when the Europeans started colonizing the world some 500 years ago, when they came upon ancient civilizations and native people around the world, they found they had huge amounts of gold. And when they asked them, who does the gold belong to? They said, the gold belongs to the gods. It wasn't our gold. And in there lies a very important clue as to what was really going on in the ancient times. One of the best clues we find about gold is in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. Genesis 2, we find the first reference to gold. And that's before Eve had been fashioned from Adam's rib. So Adam was still alone on earth, and the narrator that talks about what's happening in the Bible talks about the land of Havilah, where the land is good, there's water, and there is gold. So already then, gold was a very important part of human history. And this is something that we need to take very seriously if we're going to uncover who we are and why we're here as a species. And the ancient texts, the Sumerian texts, specifically, not just the Sumerian texts, many ancient texts from the East always and refer to the gold and the obsession for gold all the time. But the Sumerian texts are very specific about explaining the obsession for the gold by the Anunna gods, or the Anunnaki as they became known, and the fact that they were the ones that came in search of gold on this planet, and that they were digging gold in large quantities, and they found the gold in specific parts of the world, and that's where they established huge activity and huge gold mining activity, and were obviously mining gold on a scale that we can't even imagine today.
Ispričajte nam tu staru sumersku priču o dolasku takozvanih bogova, o njihovim mjestima sletanja, gdje su gradili svoje baze i svoja postrojenja.
Yeah, the Sumerian texts speak extensively about the Anunna gods, the Anunnaki, and they refer to Anu and Enlil and Enki. They were connected to each other. They seemed to be father and two sons. And these beings came to Earth a long, long time ago. Some researchers have put it at about 500,000 years, more or less, that they came to Earth from another planet. That planet is referred to as Nibiru. And they came here specifically looking for gold. And the reason why they were looking for gold remains a very mysterious story itself. It seems that they weren't looking for gold, the yellow shiny gold as we see it today, but for other forms of gold. But we can get back to that later if we have time. What they did do is they arrived on Earth, Anu, Enlil and Enki, and they started looking for gold, and they found gold in huge quantities. And they referred to, one of the places that they referred to where the gold came from was a place called Abzu. And that's where Enki established a vast gold mining empire. Now, many people have been speculating about where is the Abzu, what is the Abzu? And I think that my research in Southern Africa has provided the physical evidence that it was indeed in Southern Africa that the Abzu was located, because of the vast amount of evidence of ancient gold mining, the vast number of ancient gold mines, and the vast number of ancient ruins that we find in Southern Africa connected to the generation of energy and the mining of gold. So what the Sumerian texts refer to as the Abzu is no longer a mystery.
Što nam stari sumerski tekstovi zapravo govore o stvaranju čovjeka?
The Sumerian texts once again give us a spectacular version of who we are and where we come from as a species, where it refers to the Anunnaki doing their gold mining in the Abzu or Southern Africa, and they just were not getting enough gold. They needed more gold and they wanted help, but there were only a small number of them. So they decided to clone a new species as a primitive worker to help work in the gold mines and to help them mine more gold. And that's where we, humanity, suddenly seem to appear. And the Sumerian texts speak about the Abzu, the technology that they used, and the fact that they decided at a specific point to clone a new species. And some of the translations say, let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker shall be created. Our instructions he will understand, he'll learn how to use the tools, and he will bring relief to the Anunnaki in the Abzu in our efforts to mine the gold. And they refer to Adamu, the creation of Adamu, as the Bible calls it Adam. The Sumerian texts call this first being Adamu, that was cloned and created by the Anunnaki or the Anunna gods, specifically for helping with the mining of gold.
Vi stižete iz Južne Afrike, tamo živite, a u ovoj priči upravo je Južna Afrika Abzu, odnosno mjesto drevnog rudarenja iz sumerskih priča o nastanku čovječanstva. Ima li zaista u Južnoj Africi, odnosno u Abzu, ostataka ili možda potpuno sačuvanih drevnih rudnika zlata?
There are many references and many recent discoveries of ancient gold mines and ancient shafts and ancient tunnels. That goes right across southern Africa. I have personally gathered a number of these examples. There was a geological survey done between 2005 and 2010 just around the town of Lydenburg in that eastern part of South Africa to count the number of small mines. There were small mines into the sides of mountains that were being used for gold mining in the 1800s. And I suspect that these actually all ancient gold mines that were just reused in the 1800s. And they counted around 75,000 of these gold mines. So that already tells us there was a huge amount of gold mining going on, not just recently, but in ancient times. In the 30s, miners in the northern part of South Africa came across mysterious tunnels about 30 meters deep when they were mining gold themselves, that tunnels that should not be there. In the Volkberg Mountains, northern South Africa, once again, there are dozens of kilometers of underground tunnels that indicate gold mining. There are secret mines that are found by Anglo-American, for example, and I was given this information by the chief geologist for Anglo-American over a beer in a pub that told me they often find ancient gold mines, but the instructions are whenever they come across these ancient gold mines, they must just cover them up and move right along because they don't want to pick up trouble with, native people, with ancient civilizations, people, historians and archaeologists that will then secure the mine and they won't allow them to do any more mining. But they have a secret file at the head office of Anglo-American where they keep all the locations of these ancient mines. A researcher in Seattle was told in the 1990s by De Beers that they found a mine shaft 22,000 feet deep that was cut with absolute precision. Now, we don't have that kind of technology today. Even in modern days, in 2014, I was just told recently that a guy that works in a mine in Carltonville, they were busy mining in a modern mine when suddenly the one part of the mine caved in and opened up an ancient tunnel that was cut with absolute precision that they couldn't understand. That section of the mine was then closed off and never reopened again, and no one is allowed back in there. But in the 1970s, a guy that was part of a mine rescue team that were testing their equipment went down a sinkhole in a town of Carltonville, which is famous for the West Rand of Johannesburg, the West Rand where all the gold mines were from the early 1900s. And they went down the sinkhole to test their equipment, and about 20 or 30 meters deep, they found the side of the sinkhole that was caved in. They opened it up and they found a tunnel, an ancient tunnel that was paved all the way around. They walked into the dark tunnel, and several meters into the darkness, they stumbled upon what was described to me as a statue of Viracocha, the pre-Inca deity that was responsible for civilization and mining of gold. So you can't get away from this obsession with gold. You find it all over the world. And in fact, Southern Africa, I've been able to show connections from South Africa and Zimbabwe to pretty much all ancient civilizations, to the Mayas, to the Incas, to the Phoenicians, to the Egyptians, to the Greeks, to the Romans, to the Indians, to the Hindus and the Dravidians, and also now, since my last visit to Australia, a connection to the original people of Australia through some of the rock carvings that are found in Australia that are identical to the rock carvings that I've been looking at in South Africa. The gold mining connection and the civilization of ancient time seems to be connected right across the world.
U vašim lutanjima po Južnoj Africi u potrazi za tim ostacima drevnih baza, tih takozvanih Anunnakija, naletili ste i na mjesta koja su inače bila interpretirana kao jame za robove. Što vi mislite da su oni zaista?
One of the great examples in the stone ruins of southern Africa are the slave pits that are connected to the mining of gold. Now, in the northeastern part of Zimbabwe, and remember that Great Zimbabwe is connected to all this. Great Zimbabwe, the famous stone ruins in Masvingo, Zimbabwe, southeastern Zimbabwe. Great Zimbabwe is connected to all these millions of stone circles and millions of stone structures throughout South Africa. It is not separate. But and to the ancient civilizations that were gold mining kings, that were mining gold and were trading with gold. The Monomotapa kingdom that were known as the Golden Kings. But northeast of Great Zimbabwe, we find the province of Nyanga, and there are thousands of these strange circular structures that are sunken into the ground. They're known as slave pits or grain pits or animal pits. And that was completely debunked by Zimbabwean geologist Anne Kritzinger, who started researching these mysterious structures. And she found that they all had inlet valves and they had outlet valves. And she found in the outlet valves there was a high concentration and deposits of gold in the outlet valves of these so-called pits. So her conclusion then was that these must have been tanks in ancient times, some sort of a tank for the purification or the extraction of gold. No other argument or explanation would make any sense. So somehow they were used for the treatment or the extraction of gold. And in the outlet valves, that gold was deposited in the valves, in these pipes that leave these these so-called slave pits.
Kako ste uopće počeli obraćati pažnju na sve te megalitske krugove i do kakvih ste zaključaka došli u vezi njih?
Well, I was first introduced to the stone circles by Johann Heine, who also rediscovered Adam's calendar in 2003. But Johann came to one of my presentations in 2007, and after my presentation on the origins of humankind, started showing me the aerial photographs that he'd been taking for, at that stage, for about 15 years already. These remarkable aerial photographs of these stone circles. Now, I had heard about these stone circles in South Africa, but I'd never really seen any aerial photographs of it, because there were only a few in existence. And I suddenly realized this is what I was writing about in my book, Slave Species of God. This is it. This is the ancient empire of the gold mining Anunnaki that were in southern Africa. So I started looking at it and to realize that the ancient circles have been written about for 500 years already. The Portuguese first write about the stone circles in the Portuguese records in the late 1400s and early 1500s when they came around the Cape Point, the Cape of Good Hope, on their way to India. So it suddenly brought to attention that we're dealing with a vanished civilization that nobody knows anything about. And when I started exploring the stone circles, it became evidence that we're dealing with something very different, and not dwellings for people or dwellings for cows or, places for keeping animals. This is far more than that. And then the research started to pile up very quickly when I started discovering the stone tools and artifacts that showed and exhibited very strong acoustic properties. And that's where I started collecting the cone-shaped tools and the stones, the elongated stones that ring like bells, and other tools and artifacts, the torus stones, the toroid stones, the stones with the holes in them that look like donuts. And we started measuring very powerful and strong energies around these donut-shaped stones. And we started recording the frequencies of the stones that ring like bells. And then we realized that the stone circles themselves are actually energy-generating devices, because every stone circle is completely unique. No stone circle is the same as any other stone circle. And once I realized that we're dealing with sound as a common denominator here, the information just started to flow in like a river in flood, because it's much easier then to recognize and identify the pieces of the puzzle to push you in the right direction of research. And when I also heard that the stones in the walls of the stone ruins ring like bells, I realized that the stone walls in the stone circles themselves are to do with sound and acoustics, and not just random stone wall structures for people or for animals. And so this is how the discovery of sound that is connected to the ancient structures and civilizations of South Africa and Southern Africa became a central theme in the research.
Jeste li radili kakva mjerenja energije u tim krugovima i s kakvim rezultatima?
Yeah, when we started doing measurements in the stone circles, our whole universe just exploded, because we realized that these are very powerful energy generating devices. Every stone circle that we measured gives off an incredible amount of energy. Sound frequencies coming out of the stone walls in the very high gigahertz. From 11 gigahertz to 35, 36 gigahertz of sound frequencies coming out of the stone walls. And then the sound somehow generates an electromagnetic field in the stone circles. So we measured very powerful electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic waves coming out of the stone circles, nothing outside, but only concentrated on the inside. And then these circles are connected together with all these channels. It's like wires connecting them all together. So every stone circle is an energy generating device connected to another generating device by these channels that are like wires connecting them, creating a huge energetic grid. The electromagnetic fields in the stone circles prevent you from getting satellite connection, so you lose GPS in there, especially at Adam's calendar, where it's even more powerful than any of the stone circles. We also measured heat signatures, that this measurement of the average heat temperature 200 meters below the surface, and some of the heat signatures especially at Adam's calendar, suggest that you're standing on top of a volcano, which is not the case. So whatever is happening inside the stone circles is beyond our current level of understanding. What we do know is that it works, it's alive, and it's giving us huge amounts of energy as we sit here today. And all we need to do is figure out how to use it, and we can pretty much distribute free energy and free electricity to the whole world from the southern part of Africa. Why do I say this? Because there are more than 10 million of these stone circles in South Africa and Zimbabwe and Botswana and Mozambique, scattered throughout that huge central part of southern Africa, mostly South Africa and Zimbabwe. Huge energy generating grid. And part of those stone circles are structures that resemble magnetrons, giant stone circles that are built in the shape of magnetrons, acoustic high-frequency energy generating devices. And each one of these magnetrons would generate arguably more energy than all the power plants on Earth today. The problem is that we have thousands of these magnetron-type stone structures that are still active today and creating huge amounts of energy. All we got to do is figure out how to use it.
Doživjeli ste jedan neobičan događaj koji je zapravo neka vrsta čudnog susreta između drevne tehnologije i suvremene tehnologije. Ispričajte nam taj događaj, a također i s kakvim ste se još tipovima oruđa susretali?
Well, once you again start to look at what is it we're dealing with here, all these rocks and these stones are made of very strong crystalline substance. They're very rich in silica. Some of them are rich in iron, especially the ones that ring like bells. So we're dealing with silicon-based technology, just in a way that we don't use today because it's not profitable to use silicon-based technology in its natural form, in other words, in stone. Granites, dolerites are very rich in silica, very rich in crystalline substance. And remember, silica has memory. Crystalline substances conduct light, they conduct sound, they contain memory. We use silicon-based technology in the highest, most advanced technology today. So that should allow people to realize that these ancient civilizations were using stones as an advanced form of technology to do everything they did. And they generated energy, and they used this for everything they needed to do. And this is where I started collecting the cone-shaped tools that were the tips for Caesar beam technology, the donut-shaped stones, the torus stones, the stones with holes in them. They look like a giant donut made out of stone. And we started measuring very powerful energy fields around these donut-shaped stones. It's only more recently that I discovered that these donut-shaped stones, just even in their passive state, just by sitting on a desk, they seem to absorb all the ambient sound and they suck it into the donut, into the middle of the stone, and they amplify the sound frequencies and they put it out like scalar waves, like scalar technology, very, very high decibels. One donut-shaped stone was measured to give us up to 3,500 decibels of sound. This is incredibly powerful sound energy that is generated by these donut-shaped stones. And because we know that everything in creation seems to have, or everything that we've observed in creation to now, seems to have the common shape of this torus field, the galaxy, our solar system, atom structure, and so forth, has this torus-shaped stone. We realize that we're dealing with toroid vortex energy generators, and that's what these donut-shaped stones are. Toroid vortex energy field generators. And this was proved when I recently took one of these torus stones to Nassim Haramein in Hawaii at the Resonance Project Institute. I thought that Nassim was going to be able to do some interesting research because he's all into resonance and sound. It turned out that he wasn't able to do anything with the stone, so the stone has now been taken to 2 other laboratories. We've given the torus stones to 2 other laboratories to actually do research with in the USA. We're looking forward to some amazing breakthrough research from that. But an interesting thing happened on the way to Chicago, on my way to Nassim, when I put the torus stone in my bag, and we got on the aeroplane, and I forgot about the stone. And at one stage at Doha International Airport, when we were crossing to go to the United States, they stopped the plane from taking off. and I was called off the plane to open my bag, which was lying next to the aeroplane, and because they said there was a security threat in my bag. Upon opening the bag, they saw the stone in my bag, and lots of commotion, lots of confusion. And when I finally got back into the aeroplane, Louise told me that when the captain came out of the cockpit, he told her that whatever was in that bag crashed the TSA security system, and this is why they stopped the plane from taking off. So we can thank Homeland Security and the United States TSA, Homeland Security, for providing the scientific and physical evidence that the Torah stone is ancient advanced technology, and it is so powerful that while it was going through the scans and all the frequencies and scanning that they put our bags through, one of those frequencies must have gone into the middle of the stone and put out a very powerful electromagnetic pulse or something like that, and it shut down the entire security system in the TSA security office.
Zbog čega je mjesto koje ste nazvali Adamov kalendar toliko važno i toliko drugačije od svih tih drugih kamenih krugova kojih, kako ste i sami rekli, ima oko 10 milijuna?
Yeah, Adam's calendar was rediscovered by Johann Heine in 2003 by accident when he flew over it in a helicopter and he saw it on the edge of a cliff, and he realized that's not just a normal concentration of stones, that is an ancient site. So he came back and he started to measure it to find out that it's aligned with the equinoxes and solstices, and it's actually a calendar that still works with every day of the year. You can use it as a calendar, but it's much more than that. What I then discovered when I started doing my own research is that the site is connected to all the other ancient stone ruins, and it was probably the flagship among these millions of stone structures in southern Africa. And there's actually an interesting reference in Zachariah Sitchin's books that refers to the construction of the site by Enki, and the calculation that I did is around 285,000 years ago, because it refers to that 40 Shar after arriving on earth, Enki built himself a special place of observing in the deep Abzu on the edge of a cliff, aligned with his abode and the peaks. So his abode, I assume, was Great Zimbabwe, which I think was possibly the head office and the headquarters, Enki's headquarters in the Abzu, in the gold mining empire. And then the peaks, it refers to the peaks, and I think he's referring to the pyramids, but not the Egyptian pyramids, the pyramids in the valley below Adam's calendar that are aligned with the calendar and the rise of Orion. So there's a lot more to Adam's calendar that first meets the eye. And remember that it is Adam's calendar, Great Zimbabwe, and the Great Pyramid of Giza that are all aligned on the Nilotic meridian, the 31 degrees east longitudinal line, which in ancient times was Greenwich Mean Time on planet Earth. But Adam's calendar is also known as Inzalo Yelanga by Zulu knowledge keepers and the holders of ancient knowledge in southern Africa. And Credo Mutwa told me that he was initiated at Inzalo Yelanga, or Adam's calendar, in 1937 as a young shaman. And it is known by the African knowledge keepers as the birthplace of the sun, or where humanity was created by the gods. Why was humanity created by the gods? To be slaves for the gods in the gold mines. So this is well kept an oral tradition by knowledge keepers in southern Africa, and Credo Mutwa is one of these knowledge keepers that has shared this information with us. I gave the name Adam's calendar to it when I first discovered it, and I had to write about it. So I came up with the name Adam's calendar, not realizing how close to the truth it was going to be, that this was actually where Adam was most likely created. So it is actually Adam's calendar that was created by Enki, but it's much more than that. It is a powerful device. It is a very powerful energy generating device, far more so than the millions of stone circles that surround it, because we have very strong sound frequencies coming out of the site, more than 375 gigahertz of sound. That is insane. That is just unimaginable amount of energy coming from inside of the calendar. Nothing outside, only from the inside. The electromagnetic fields are extremely powerful, 3 or 4 times as powerful as any of the stone circles that we've measured, that run horizontally. And then between the central calendar stones, the electromagnetic fields run vertically out of the ground into the sky, giving us a crossing of electromagnetic fields and creating what one could describe as a vortex or a portal of some sort. Very powerful energies, and we are yet to figure out what they were doing with all this energy.
Na predavanjima pokazujete slike koje ukazuju na sličnost između skoro svih vrsta drevnih hramova sa, što je iznenađujuće, suvremenim procesorima i čipovima. Što je naravno i nekakva veza sa silicijskim tehnologijama koje ste otkrili, tako ih interpretirali u drevnom kamenju. Kako vi zapravo danas, kakvim okom gledate na sve te drevne hramove prvih civilizacija koje naravno su se razvijale davno prije nove ere?
When you realize that sound and resonance is the tool that drives these ancient sites, it's the tool that is used to activate these sites. The South African stone circles are a great example, physical and scientific example, that the ancient sites are energy generating devices. That the stone circles, for example, are activated by the sound frequencies coming from the earth, the surface of the earth, giving each stone circle its very specific shape. So it's a cymatic pattern that is manifested on the surface of the earth, and then the stone walls amplify the sound. So now that we've figured this out and we have scientific proof and evidence for this, we can then extrapolate that they use the same silicon-based technology in other ancient sites all over the world. And there are Sumerian texts that tell us about the rules of heaven and earth, the fact that there's some sort of an energy grid around the earth that is mirrored on the surface of the earth, and all these ancient sites that we find are not just built randomly all over the planet. They're built very specifically on these energetic cross lines and energetic nodal points on the surface of the earth that is echoed from some sort of energy grid in the sky or around the planet. And this is when you start going to these ancient temples in Egypt, Persepolis, Sacsayhuaman, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Adam's calendar, and you realize that they are not just temples. The temples is actually an incorrect word. It's a template. It's a silicon-based technology. Giant templates that are silicon-based computer chips that we would see in our computers today, but these are just silicon-based technology on a gigantic scale, using the obelisks as antennas, putting energy into the sky and possibly bringing down energy from the sky into the template. All these ancient temples have got too many pillars and not enough space. They have huge resonating chambers in them, like the Parthenon and other ancient sites connected to the pillars. The pillars are the resonators. It's always built on a giant silica platform, a quartz platform, and you realize that we're dealing with silicon-based technology on a gigantic scale. And when you see this, you realize that this has got nothing to do with offering food or offering praise or worshipping or praying. That was a much later imposed idea on these ancient sites. Originally, they're energy generating devices to do something. And at this stage, it seems that they were holding up some sort of an energetic grid around the earth, possibly creating an atmosphere, possibly creating oxygen, possibly doing all kinds of things that we can't even imagine. And this has been measured. An energy grid around the earth has been measured by my friend in South Africa. It's like a binary code made up of ones and zeros that exists around the planet, just the way the movie Matrix describes it to us very, very clearly. And we're now measuring it, we're identifying it. And the fascinating thing about these ancient sites, like the Parthenon and many other ancient sites, they seem to use human sound to activate these ancient silicon chip boards, these ancient sites, because you see these amphitheaters connected to these ancient circuit boards. So they obviously put people into these amphitheaters, got them to make a lot of noise, and that sound of people was then channeled into these giant circuit boards to generate the energy and start it to perform whatever function it's supposed to perform.
Bilo je skoro nemoguće da u svom istraživanju megalite zaobiđete najpoznatiji megalitski spomenik na svijetu, a to je Stonehenge. Kako se u vaš scenarij uklapa njegovo postojanje i što mislite koliko je on zapravo star?
Well, Stonehenge, just like all ancient sites, is also driven by sound. Many experiments have been done in Stonehenge, and they found very fascinating acoustic properties in Stonehenge that are there by design. They're not there by accident. It's inside Stonehenge and not outside. So the same as the stone circles in South Africa. But Stonehenge is a great example to show us how old these ancient sites are. If you look at the erosion on the stones of Stonehenge, these are new stones around us here. You can see the new edges, that this is broken off. You can see the sharp edges. And I've seen stones that have broken 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years ago. You can see the edges and the breaks, and they're still sharp breaks. The erosion is not extreme. But when you look at the erosion on the stones at Stonehenge, there's extreme erosion, especially on the one stone that has fallen over and broken, one of the two tall stones at the center of Stonehenge. Where the stone broke, the erosion on that stone is about 50 centimeters. That is not something that can happen in a few thousand years. It's just not physically possible or, geologically possible for sarsen stone, which is one of the hardest stones known to mankind, can erode 50 centimeters in a few thousand years. So what Stonehenge is telling us is that that site is hundreds of thousands, probably more than 1 million years old. And that takes it back into an era that we know nothing about, into an era possibly even older than the stone circles of southern Africa. And that just, again, shows us how old and mysterious and exciting the history of our planet is.
U više navrata ste spominjali već ta konusna oruđa, te zapravo stijene, to kamenje koje ima određene oblike kao dio tih naprednih tehnologija. Kada bismo sumirali tu vašu priču, što je najvažnije znati i imati na umu o njima?
When I started researching the stone circles in South Africa, I started collecting some very mysterious stone tools and artifacts. One of the most common things that I find are cone-shaped tools. And I was perplexed by it. It didn't make any sense, but I knew that they were important. Then I realized that the stones ring like bells. We figured out that it had everything to do with sound, with resonance, and we measured the energies in the stone circles. We realized that there were powerful energy devices. We measured Adam's calendar, which is just off the charts. It's incredibly powerful. And then I started realizing that the Taurus stone shape stones with the holes in them are powerful energy devices. We measured that. And I started to connect two and two together when I started finding cone-shaped tools in all ancient civilizations, from the Americas to Europe to Australia to Africa to India. Cone-shaped tools found everywhere. And I realized that it's the cone-shaped tools. And Ed Leeds-Cullen, by the way, in Florida, was reported to have built Coral Castle with cone-shaped tools in his hands, where he was levitating these giant blocks of coral stone, 10 tons or more, levitating them around with cone-shaped tools in his hands. And that suddenly led to the realization that these cone-shaped tools are most likely the focus points where they absorb the sound, they're exposed to very powerful sound frequencies, and they focus the sound through a vortex into a Caesar beam. Caesar, like a laser beam, but this is a Caesar beam. And what Caesar beams do, they distort gravity fields around them. So we have, from ancient civilizations, using cone-shaped tools to construct the temples in Sumeria, and Ed Leeds-Cullen constructing the Coral Castle in southern Florida with huge blocks and cone-shaped tools around the stone circles in South Africa and all over the world. We have very compelling evidence that cone-shaped tools were the tips to create Caesar beam technology, and that will explain to us how they cut the rock, how they possibly made the rock soft so you could mold it with your hands with certain frequencies, how they could levitate the stone. Once you've got that kind of technology and you understand how to use it, you can pretty much do anything you want.
Michael, hvala vam na ovom razgovoru i do neke sljedeće prilike. Doviđenja.
Thank you very much. Lovely talking to you.